All right, so we're going to be doing some rotor scoping using our Rotor Brush in After Effects. This is what the end product is going to look like. Essentially, we're going to make our video into separated layers. So we're going to cut around the foreground image and isolate the foreground from the background. Then once we do that, we can manipulate the background, add a certain color to it, without affecting the foreground, and then we can add some text in between both of those layers. Okay, so let's go into After Effects. In After Effects, we're going to do Command I and import our boy footage. And a quick way to create a new composition in After Effects is to take your footage and just drag it to the new comp icon over here, or the new comp icon down here. And what it'll do is it'll copy all of the properties of that clip into your composition. So this is a 1920 by 1080. It's 3 seconds long and 2 frames, and it's 29.97 frames per second. So if I click on the composition, you can see it's 1920, 1080, 3 seconds, 2 frames, and 29.97. Okay. So we're going to double click on the boy layer. Anytime we double click on a layer, it will open it up in a separate tab next to composition. So here it is, and we're going to select our Rotor Brush tool, which is up here in our toolbar. And I'm just going to click on it. And what we're going to do, this is sort of like the magic wand in Photoshop. So the magic wand, you're kind of selecting what you want included. And it kind of figures out, based on what you select, how to expand that selection. So kind of the same principle with the Rotor Brush. We're going to just increase the diameter of the brush. So if you don't see brushes in your panel, make sure that you come up to Window and select Brushes. Make sure it has that check mark on it. And then in here, we can just select a brush, but increase the diameter to about 100. And then the other important thing is we want to increase hardness to 100%. This will create a really hard edge when we're selecting. So now we're just going to brush on what we want to select. So if I just create a brush from the top of this hat down to the coat, it selected all of that. So then I'm going to tell it I want to increase that selection by brushing on his jacket, and all of that gets included, and then up on his hat. And I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so we can see. All right, so there's a little bit more of his hat. If you accidentally select the background, you can hold down the Option key. Oops, my brush is doing something crazy. I accidentally hit the spacebar key. So I'm just going to drag my playhead back to the very beginning. So hold down the Option key, and you see that the brush turns red. That means it's going to eliminate whatever you're brushing on. So I took it out of that. And a little bit there. On top of his coat, and then this little flap here. But I don't want to select it. I don't want to select this flap with my brush because it's a little too big. So I'm going to decrease my diameter to about 20, so that way I can just brush on that flap. Same thing over here for this coat flap. Oops. You can also do Command Z. That's better. And then this area right here, I want to eliminate from my selection. So I'm going to hold down my Option key. I might go a little bit smaller on the diameter and then select that. So that way it's not part of my selection. And be careful with this jacket because it's a little tricky. Like this part didn't get selected. There's a couple of ways that you can view your selection. I'm going to go back to Fit. And here you can view it as an alpha channel. So if I click on this icon below, I can see what I've selected in white, and what's not selected is black. So this part of his jacket I haven't selected. So I'm just going to click on that to make sure it's in there. And let me double check to see what this is. I'm going to go back to my my boundary view. Yeah, this little area didn't get selected, so I'll paint over that. Then I can also look into the alpha overlay view. And here I can see the background a little bit more clearly. Like right in here, it looks like I didn't select that part of his jacket because it is red. So I will paint over that. That's better. So this view shows the background with the color overlay. So you can change the color if you'd like and the opacity of that color. So if I wanted to change to maybe a pink or a purple view, I can do that. And it's meant to help you just deselect the background and select the foreground. So kind of toggle between all of these views to make sure that you've gotten everything in your segmentation boundary. So all of this pink area is now our segmentation boundary. And After Effects will create 20 frames going forward. It'll hold on to that boundary. But after 20 frames, either forward or backwards, it's going to lose the boundary box. So we'll have to repaint it every 20 frames. Okay, so we're just going to drag this playhead here to the right. And as we do that, After Effects will start to propagate each of those segmentation boundaries across those frames. So just give it a while here and we'll go frame by frame. At 20 frames, we're going to lose it and we'll have to redraw it. So right there's no segmentation boundary. So again, coming over to the brush, you go up to about 100 and redraw it. You can also hold down the Command key and drag your mouse up or down, and it'll increase the size or decrease the size of your brush. And again, if you accidentally select some of the background, use the Option key or Alt key. If you adjust the segmentation boundary as you're going frame by frame, as I did kind of over here, then a new base frame doesn't get created. The base frames just really help your computer, but if it's referencing one base frame over a large number of frames, then your computer is going to work a little harder. So for me, I ended up with 1, 2, 3 base frames. And then here, as I was doing some manual adjustments on the fly, it didn't create a base frame. But I'm okay with that. So I'm finished here. And I'm just going to go back and double check how this all is looking, making sure that everything is pretty much inside my segmentation boundary. Gotta wait a little bit as that tries to catch up. Right here I see a little bit that needs to be fixed. as I do that, then all the others start to get propagated with that change in it. So it is a little time consuming to do this, but I think the payoff is worth it because it's pretty cool to have separate layers for your video. So just spend some time here and kind of go through all your footage frame by frame, making any adjustments that you need to. So once we're good with that, we're going to hit save and we're going to do some smoothing here. So up here in the effect controls panel, come down to feather and increase that to about 10. So it's going to give us a little bit of a feathered edge. And then also we want to reduce the chatter. If I were to play this back using the space bar, you can look at that edge and it's just like it's very busy. That's all the chatter as the frame as it moves. Let me play that again. So you can see it up here. That pink bounding area is just really moving. So I'm just going to reduce the chatter to about 20%. And then we'll watch it again. And it's a little smoother. Okay, so now we're going to refine our segmentation boundary. Whenever you're doing a mask, there are certain areas where you really don't want a hard edge. So many times we want to create a little bit of a smoother edge on specifically on hair or on something that doesn't have a good contrast between the background and the foreground. So right in here, it's kind of hard, but some of it starts to blend into the background. So right around here, we can use a little bit of more of it's almost like a feathering, but it's not. It's a refining tool that's in the Rotor Brush tool. So right behind the Rotor Brush tool, if you click on that small triangle on the bottom right and just hold your mouse down, it'll reveal the other tool. And this is the Refine Edge tool. So we're going to select that, and we're just going to go around the cap here because it's a little harder to recognize the foreground from the background here. The jacket is pretty good because the hard edge is okay, but somewhere like right in here and all around his head, it's a little harder to distinguish that from the background. So with our Refine Edge tool, I'm just going to increase my magnification ratio, and I'm going to put my playhead at the very beginning. And really, I just want kind of this area to have a little bit more feathering. So what this is doing is it's creating some semi-transparent areas. So I said everything that's in black will be completely dropped off. Everything that's in white will stay. But then it'll create these areas of gray. So all of these gray areas will be semi-transparent. So we want to keep that. It gives it a better realistic look. So I'm just going to draw this little refinement around the edge of the cap. And everything else can kind of stay as a hard edge. Okay, so once we do that, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to move our playhead down to about 20 frames, and then we'll redraw that. So I'm going to decrease my magnification ratio, kind of make sure that everything stays selected as I move through this. Here's my 20th frame, and I will redraw it. Okay, so we've done that, and you can see like right in here I accidentally went a little too far in, but that's okay because everything that's in white is going to stay. Again, we're just kind of doing these transparent areas. It's only going to really be applied to the segmentation boundary. So we are good. So let's do Command S and save. And then we can look at this one more time. We can just kind of play through this and make sure that everything is still selected. Our refine edge looks good. And once we're happy with it, we can freeze it. So you can still make changes, but you'll need to unfreeze it. Once we freeze it, After Effects is going to be using a lot less processing power. Everything is going to be cached into After Effects when we freeze it. So I'm going to go ahead and freeze it now. It'll take a couple of minutes to do this, but essentially it won't have to work as hard because all of this is taking a lot of processing power. Once we freeze it, it'll be cached and it'll be saved. If you need to make adjustments, you'll have to unfreeze it, make your adjustment, and then freeze it again. Okay, so once it's done, we can come back to our Composition tab. And here we have our foreground isolated from the background. All right, so at this point, we'll come over to the Project panel and we'll select the boy clip again. We're going to add the original footage back into our layer comp, but we want it underneath what we've just isolated. So here, this footage is going to serve as the background. So here's the original footage, and here's our isolated foreground. Put them together and come up with that. We have these great layers separated now. So the first thing we want to do is let's apply some color to the background. So let's click on Effects and Presets, and we're going to look for the Hue and Saturation effect. So if I just come over here, it's going to be under Color Correction because we're adjusting color. And just scroll down to Hue and Saturation and drag it to the bottom layer. Okay, here we're going to select Colorize, and then we can adjust the hue. I have my hue to a -122, and that'll give us like a blue color. And then let's adjust the saturation to about 29. And let's lighten it up a little bit by about, let's try 15. Looks good to me. And now we can add our text. So we'll select our text tool and let's type in Winter Blues. And we're going to move that layer in between our two boy video clips. So I'm going to select or deselect my text layer and then reselect it so that I can use some of my character properties over here. So let's select, let's just go with Arial, and let's make it all caps. And let's put on a black stroke so that we can see it a little bit better. So I'm going to click on this black or stroke effect and change it to black. Let's do about 14. And we'll do fill over stroke. And I have my font at about 162. Okay, let's also adjust the opacity on this. So select the Winter Blues layer and hit the letter T for opacity. And let's change that to about 50% opacity. So here's our final product. Let's take a look at it again. All right, so we have the text coming in from right to left, and it just starts off screen and ends off screen. Okay, and it also looks like it has a little bit of motion blur on it. So let's start with our text off screen. So I'm going to hit the letter P for position, and I'm going to move this to the right, just slightly off the frame, and that'll be our first keyframe. Then I'll go to the end, maybe back off a few here, so I'm at like 228 instead of the very last frame. And then I'm going to move that in. Careful to only move the x-axis. And about right there, that'll be our last keyframe. So I will turn on motion blur here. And then, because it's starting on and off screen, it's not that big of a deal, but let's go ahead and still add our ease in, ease out keyframes. So keyframe assistant, I'm going to ease in to my last keyframe and ease out of my first one. So I think I might change my stroke. I think this stroke is a little too harsh. Let me zoom in a little. And instead of 14, maybe something like a 7. If we don't put any stroke, it's a little hard to separate it from the background, and it's a little hard to read. So I think maybe about 6 or 7 will do. Oops. Yeah, I think I like that better. So it's just a matter of playing it for your taste. Okay, that is it.